And
Mm.
that's the big thing. And I think it's super. You're amazing with it. So I love having you on here and doing it. And it brings a lot of clarity to me, and or at least it gives me another way to kind of think about it. Right, different ways. So here we go. You ready? Chapter 11, Diamond Sutra. Um, Subhuti, if there were as many Ganges rivers as the number of grains of sand in the Ganges, would you say that the number of grains of sand in all those Ganges rivers would be very many? Subhuti answered, very many indeed, most honored one. If the number of Ganges rivers were that large, how much more so would the number of grains of sand in all of those Ganges river? Subhuti, I will declare a truth to you. If a good man or a good woman filled over 10,000 galaxies of worlds with the seven treasures for each grain of sand in all those Ganges rivers, and gave it all away for the purpose of compassion, charity, and giving alms, would this man or woman not gain great merit and spread much happiness? Subhuti replied, very much so, most honored one. Subhuti, if after studying and observing even a single stanza of this sutra, another person were to explain it to others, the happiness and the merit that would result from this virtuous act would be far greater. So again, when I first read this, I was like, well, then this is a no-brainer. I need to, kind of study this, learn it, and share it with others, right?
Mm.
And just for the, I don't know, it just that was like my immediate response after seeing this. The one thing I don't recall is what are the seven treasures with the seven treasures.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, let's see if I can give you the bet. Hold on, because I'm gonna tell you this one. Ooh, okay. Okay, seven treasures, Buddhism, Diamond Sutra. Okay, now, okay, so I am looking at the specific. Oh dear. Okay, now I know what it is. Okay, Jesus. Okay. Okay, yeah, you thought this was gonna be short.
Ah,
Okay, nutshell, but I'm going to give you the link for you to specifically look at because I don't want you to get too entirely crazy lost in this because you remember what I told you about specifically when you're practicing the Dharma is going to have multiple phases through it. You know what I'm saying? It's going to have that myriads. Okay. The best reference I can give you that you could also look to help you kind of decode a whole lot of this is the Dalai Lama's The Universe Within an Atom. Okay. This is basically
where do I look again? I'm sorry.
the Dalai Lama's The Universe Inside of an Atom.
Okay.
Yeah, it's where the Dalai Lama writes about his tour about going to go see scientists. It's absolutely amazing.
Okay.
But the reason being is because you are talking now about the threefold. You're talking about the threefold Lotus Sutra. Okay, not just the threefold Lotus Sutra, but you're getting really deep into further into Buddhism now. You see what I'm saying? This is a specific spectra of one specific light angle, and this one basically is the teaching of the seven wealths, and it goes back into Tibetan Buddhism, is known as the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, and that is the noble, and that is the nobility of wealth, which is the seven treasures of noble ones, which are those people and nobility is described as into those people who are not pushed away from their path. You see what I'm saying? It's not so much as a method of royalty, but it is more so the word being used as noble, such like a noble element. You know what I'm saying? Only under extreme circumstances are you going to be able to actually cause these people to change or alter their course because they're on their one path in that specific direction.
So nobility being somebody who is on their path and not likely to be swayed.
Yes.
And almost impossible to knock them off the path. Would you say that?
Pretty much, yeah. Okay, those are very, very skilled and very mindful. This one gets a little in there. The reference they're specifically talking about is the seven ones known as the devotion, faith, and confidence and trust. Then there is your morality or ethics, and then there is your generosity, your study, your contemplation. your self-respect, dignity, your humility, the decorum, that kind of thing, how you basically act.
Okay.
And then you've got your respect for others, propriety, you know what I'm saying? The understanding of one person and individualism is what it comes into. And then it's and then it is also discriminating wisdom. I can run through these really, really quick, or I can just send you the link. Which would you rather me do?
Let's run through them really, really quick.
Okay. The
You want to
first
share
one,
your screen while you're looking at it?
I don't know how to share my screen. I've got it on my phone. I've got you on my phone, and I've got this here in my screen.
I
So do
got
you
you.
want
Okay.
me to
No,
let me
you're
to
good.
send it to you in
Yeah, you
Facebook?
should. Yeah, send me the link, and then I'll or tell me what I need to look up.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna cut because I'm horrible at these things. There you are. Last person. Okay. And click and click. There you go.
Where'd you send it? Okay, I got you.
Yeah. And okay, this particular one, and the reason being is because I specifically chose this one. Not that this is the be all cure all, but the reason why I chose this particular organization is because the only time that I have ever had to deal with anybody with a leveled articulation or motion of the actual seven treasures, any references with that, commonly always go back to Tibetan Buddhism. So you see what I'm saying? So that's where you're going to find the bulk of this information, so to speak, if that makes any sense. You see what I'm saying? You're going to have to literally go to that specific corner of the world or that specific practice of Buddhism to get exactly what you're looking at inside of the Diamond Sutra. Now, you've noticed this is not the only one particular reference in Buddhism that you specifically have to go look for. As you've seen throughout the other chapters, they all have different specific sects of Buddhism, and none of them necessarily correlate. Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying? The Diamond Sutra has so many different references pulled into it. Uh-oh. What did I do?
Right. No, I got you. I didn't make sense because I wasn't able to listen to half of that.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Let me close out another app that I have on
Okay.
here. My computer was like
Had a seizure. Had a seizure.
Yeah, it was like what the fuck, homie.
Like,
and that's why I ordered a new laptop. Because I can't stand this shit. Okay. From the top, you share this one mostly because why?
This one specifically because if you recall, since we've gone through these chapters in the Diamond Sutra, you've noticed that they all have different sects of Buddhism, and they don't necessarily correlate with any specific region of the world. There's no pattern behind any of them.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is because the Diamond Sutra was specifically on, because when you look at the angles of the way the sutra is, you're supposed to follow them back to the immediate references. And a lot of people, they don't quite get that the reason why it's spelled out the way it is so that you can actually go to multiple different sects of it, so they can keep each sect of Buddhism actually coordinates with historiology and information from different other sects of Buddhism. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
The Diamond Sutra
So
is a compiled.
can I just look at that as like facets of the diamond?
Yes, basically.
Making and with Buddhism being the jewel.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I ramble. It's just this stuff I don't really ever text over very, very often. But the first one, if you see there, is known as a svara, which is the dadpa, which is devotion, faith, confidence, and trust. And I'm probably going to butcher all of these names because I don't speak any of these languages.
Okay.
You know. The sila, which is known as the sulcrums, is the morality and ethics. You see the dana, which is known as the sinpa. It is generosity, dharma, study, and contemplation. So it's telling you, even though as Buddhists, most people know what the Dharma is, it's telling you specifically what in the general asset is this particular treasure. You see what I'm saying? Because these are all treasures. And then there is, I'm not even going to try any of that. The respect for others and propriety, that is yourself, others, other people's things, other people's belongings, ideas, all that stuff. And then number 7 is discriminating wisdom. Number 7, I'm going to go through real quick. Never pass up a chance to be quiet.
Sure. We- I'm terrible at that, obviously.
I'm not a Tibetan practitioner for a reason, okay? Is this starting to make sense now?
That being said, I've definitely learned to shut up more often. Um, and I've learned to uh, let other people kind of think what they're gonna think, and if they ask me a question, I'll give them a little bit of information, right, without trying to overdo it, and see where that gets them. If that kind of does that play into this, right? Like I just
It's
what
more
I've learned.
so it's more so also that it is the jewel in which, if once it's balanced with other jewels, it's also meant to be as a tempering, as to know discriminating wisdom also means to act when needed using that wisdom. If you know you can do the right thing and simply do the right thing, you don't need to flag virtue signal and send out smoke signals. That's exactly what you're going to go do, which goes back to the very first lessons of the Diamond Sutra.
Right, right. Well, let's pull that up just because, like we talked about in the beginning here, we started this 2 years ago. So let's pull up the
Chapter
first
11
lesson.
is a review.
Oh gosh. Da, 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 da. One day, long before time. Before the dawn, put his cloak
Sicily,
on.
1872.
Let's see. Great reverence. Well, I mean, just act accordingly, right? With
Right.
wisdom and discernment, and there's no need to. Oh God, what I see? I saw a line out of the prophet the other day. As a matter of fact, and I saw a line from Rumi the other day. Just kind of don't tell people what you're doing because they're generally going to ruin it anyways. Um, and the line from Rumi the other day was kind of like I stopped trying to change people and just worked on changing myself, and then everybody else changed type of thing. Is
Mm.
that does that kind of play into this?
Well, yeah, because see, the biggest the and that really does actually speak to a very interesting time of you putting everything up. I always believed, and I don't know if I've ever given you that impression, but I've always believed that there was no mistake in us meeting.
No, I mean,
I do not believe that whatsoever.
yeah,
Um, And what this circles back and basically says is that as everybody is shouting out in the world, be the change you want to be, or what have you, then the thing is that if you want to be the change you want to be, then you have to act on it. You see
right,
what I'm saying?
right,
And it is also going back into the whole thing that the Buddhism is that you do good for not for any other reason other than the fact it is to do good. You know what I mean? It's
right,
not for
right,
fame or fortune or what have you. So yeah, that's the other part of it that you're actually really, really looking at. Yeah,
right,
it's these, and they signify them as jewels because they are supposed to be some of the most valuable things. They're trying to equate it to very valuable principles of
right,
the particular path in which you are following. You see what I'm saying? And
right,
the
right,
reason being is because Buddhism figured out a long time ago that the only way people are going to truly understand and how the religion is going to survive the test of time is if there is some form of a tangible comparison that people can put into things. So a lot of these symbolisms were meant to be described as they are because they were meant to try to translate that materialistic, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
the idea
Timeless,
holds good as
timeless,
much weight as gold.
yeah, timeless values, right?
Yes.
Like jewels will pretty much always be valuable, right?
Right.
And always kind of rare. And once you find them, and then you realize what you found, and then you work that jewel, then you're able to see its inner beauty or whatever,
Right.
the whole thing, the whole thing, right?
Right.
And then, if you take it a few steps further, even if you give like a great, beautiful jewel to somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, they can fuck it up.
Mm, yes. Yeah, and it's just like, okay, and because and the thing is that the seven, the specific number seven is actually a very powerful number because it was a very single fold prime number, and in Buddhism, prime numbers are very very significant. They are very very powerful, and the reason being is because with Buddhism being a religion based off of balance and based
Hmm.
off, you know what I'm saying, based off of that, a complete and continuous balance, but growth.
Right.
Prime number is actually one that also suggests that anything that is practiced within prime has to be done continuously. So therefore, it must continue to be moved through. So these seven jewels are actually meant to be practiced and studied and dealt with and contemplated on and executed down to the very core of a number of everything that you actually specifically do. It sounds really strange, but you're talking about getting down to the nitty gritty of actually human behavior. Morality and ethics is one in which you weigh your own morals and ethics against those things around you,
Right.
and it's meant to be that specific same level, along with generosity, going all the way back to the Buddhist principle of the first perfection, which is donation with wisdom.
Right.
Generosity is the fact that you have the willingness to actually give. You see what I'm saying? But if you look at where it's at, right underneath it, where it says Dharma, the study and contemplation,
Right.
those two you will always see in this particular order, is because you're always going to want to give, but you're always going to want to give effectively. You see what I'm
Mm.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
I mean, that's
counterbalanced.
important, and well, that's important too. I mean, that's the whole, don't cast the pearls before the swine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, same thing, and I think that, it's like you just said there a couple moments ago, right? Giving with wisdom, um,
Mm-hmm.
and giving effectively, and that's a really interesting one because a lot of times, and definitely with me, as I've kind of come along through this journey, it's like I want to give everything away, but I still need to, you know what I mean? And doesn't make sense to do that again. Not to the wrong audience, right? Not to the wrong
Mm-hmm.
group, not to the wrong people, because that's just a waste of like energy and time on my behalf,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Um, and same with like, dollars and cents too.
Not
Understanding
make the
where,
dollars is not making sense.
right, right, right. That's funny too. Okay, all right, this is cool, awesome. So
Okay.
super good. Declare truth to you. Look, if after another person were explaining it, the happiness would be far greater, right? So
Mm,
if a man or woman filled over 10,000 galaxies, worlds of treasures, with the seven treasures for each grain, so like, I mean, it's just unfathomable amounts, right?
mm,
For the purpose of compassion, charity, and giving alms, would this person not gain great merit and spread much happiness? Yes. So if after studying this in just one stanza, another person were to explain it to others, the happiness and merit that would result from this virtue, act would be far greater. So you are the one doing it, and so what you're doing right now is this thing, right?
mm.
Would you say that's true?
Yeah, because it says right here, if after studying even observing a single stanza of the story, another person would explain it to others, that happened. This conversation proves that was true way back when.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can relate to you. This conversation proves that was true way back when. If we can just do one good thing through Buddhism, one good
Right.
thing, then Buddhism has done its purpose.
Okay. Okay. Sweet sauce. We're gonna pop over to chapter 12. Um, Chapter 12. Furthermore, Subhuti, if any person in any place were to teach even 4 lines of this sutra, the place where they taught it would become sacred ground and would be revered by all kinds of beings. How much more sacred would the place become if that person then studied and observed the whole sutra? Subhuti, you should know Subhuti, you should know that any person who does that would surely attain something rare and profound. Wherever this sutra is honored and revered, there is a sacred site enshrining the presence of the Buddha or one of the Buddha's most venerable disciples. And, I think that this is just saying that anybody who really kind of begins to either, if any please, were if any person in any place were to teach even 4 lines of the sutra, the place where they taught it would become sacred ground and be revered by all kinds of beings. So, anybody who has taken this into their own being already and is out there teaching it, um,
Mm-hmm.
is already showing that the presence of the Buddha is kind of out there, right?
Right.
Wherever the sutra, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then just as much so for the person who is going to study it themselves and take it in, because
Yes.
that's just more of, we'll call it a spot where the Buddha
Mm.
is shining light.
Yes. And this is what it comes down to with the best way that I can get this to wish I could basically, you know what it is? It's just it really is just the fact that you give and you do the best that you can for the sake of giving and doing the best that you can. And it is a understanding that in Buddhism, the principle of everything in Buddhism, regardless of what sect and where you come from, is done under the guise that we as human beings are trying to always make ourselves better. So if you read 1 line, 4 lines, teach it out there, like what you're doing, if you reach one other person, just one,
Right.
and that person takes it to heart and makes themselves a better person, you have just secured Buddhism in a role. You see what I'm saying?
What do you
You've
mean?
just
Excuse me.
you've
Secured
just
Buddha.
you've just secured enlightenment for that for one other person. Therefore, you did good and you pulled and you pushed that forward. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You may
yeah,
not you don't necessarily have to be Buddhist in order to be able to enact Buddhist concepts. You see what I'm saying?
for sure.
So, but then again, that's also the same universal approach that all religions do things. That's just how they all are supposed to operate. So that's
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of
I get that, right? Like I think I told you that my first podcast coach guy, the first guy that I worked with, uh he said that he was trying to bring people to Christ, and I asked him to kind of tell me what that meant. And when he lined it all back up, it was pretty much, reminded me of, like, what Buddhism would be, like enlightenment, showing them their divine selves, stuff like that, right? Finding the Christ within, or again, enlightenment, and that space, right? Is that fair?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, so with the person, then Subhuti, you should know that any person is, and so anybody really kind of taking this at heart, uh, you, or somebody teaching it, right?
Mm.
Passing the torch, as it were. Um, just recently saw, like, and shared myself, like, a picture of, like, one match going to light up a field of matches, type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm always a fan too of the idea that even like headlights, right? If you got two headlights, they're bright on their own, but when they intersect in front of you when you're driving, the section where they intersect is brighter, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
just two
Right.
lights, right?
Yep.
So it's just one light enhancing the other light, and I think that that's kind of what we're about. Is that fair?
Yeah. That's actually a very strong. That's a very good understanding of it. That is probably the root understanding of all of it. And the reason why it also did that also is because the Diamond Sutra is one of the more complex. It's one of the more very multifaceted, complex transcripts that there are of Buddhism. and it's
Uh-huh.
meant to be openly discussed amongst other people from different ideologies. The Diamond Sutra is ultimate is not it does well doing that for groups of people who are Buddhist and are studying it, but it is
Uh-huh.
specifically built and geared towards towards discussion towards other people with other ideologies.
Okay. Okay. I love it. Okay. Very cool. Let's jump. Let's do it. Let's go. 13 is kind of short too, but it's like I think for most it could get to be kind of, I mean, this is again, 13 is another one where when I first read it, I was like, yep, this, really kind of just needs to be shared, right? Like, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
do it, right? I don't know how it's gonna work, but let's figure it out, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
just definitely, I don't still, if you remember, I reached out to you right after I read it. I was like,
Oh,
look, we got to talk
oh,
about this thing. Chapter 13. Subhuti said to Buddha, "By what name shall we know this sutra so that it can be honored and studied?" The Lord Buddha replied, "The sutra shall be known as the diamond that cuts through illusion. By this name it shall be revered and studied and observed." What does his name mean? It means that when the Buddha named it, he did not have in mind any definite or arbitrary conception, and so named it. This sutra is hard and sharp, like a diamond that will cut away all arbitrary conceptions and bring one to the other shore of enlightenment. What do you think, Subhuti? Has the Buddha taught any definite teachings in this sutra? No, Lord. The Buddha has not taught any definite teachings in this sutra. What do you think, Subhuti? Are there many particles of dust in this vast universe? Subhuti replied, Yes, most honored one. Subhuti, when the Buddha speaks of particles of dust, it does not mean that I'm thinking of any definite or arbitrary thoughts. I'm merely using these words as a figure of speech. They are not real, only illusion. It is just the name. It is just the same with the word universe. These words do not assert any definite or arbitrary idea. I am only using words as words. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Buddha be perceived by means of his 32 physical characteristics? No, most honored one. The Buddha cannot be perceived by his 32 physical characteristics. Why? Because the Buddha teaches that they are not real, but are merely called the 32 physical characteristics. Subhuti, if a good and physical person, whether male or female, has, for the sake of compassion and charity, been sacrificing their life for generation upon generation, for as many generations as the grains of sands in the 3,000 universes, uh, and another follower has been studying and observing even a single section of the sutra and explains it, that person's blessings and merit would be far greater. Would have been sacrificing for life. So, even with that last line there, I'm just looking at it, right? Would that be a person that has never studied then the Diamond Sutra?
mm-hmm.
Right, if a good and faithful person who is kind of given everything for forever, but has kind of done it without that discretionary wisdom and all the other stuff that we talked about for a long time, uh, but didn't understand this sutra and apply through with that discernment, then it would be kind of for naught. Is that, I mean, is that what he's saying there?
Mm,
Not necessarily for naught, but I mean, it wouldn't. And another follower has been studying, observing, explains it to another person's blessings. So um, I think that it's kind of like you know, teach somebody to fish, right? Like I can give you and
right.
give you and give you all day long, but until I transfer this knowledge and how to apply it, then
The,
then that's
the
worthless.
the lack of discernment of wisdom is what the bigger, heavier part is, and the reason being is because it is known as the the understanding and the acceptance of the consequences based upon the facts of willful ignorance. Now, like, if you were somebody who was trying to teach somebody and they purposely did not, you know what I'm saying? They purposely would, like, you know what I'm saying? That kind of thing with a willful, basically the willful ignorant, rather than to even bother educating on the subject. This is what they think of that, and that's it.
Mm,
And even though they could be a great person, they could be a good person, you can do the best in the world you can, and truly you do be blessed. It's not necessarily not so much as for not or would not matter. It's just the fact that they would not achieve the ultimate same goal. And the reason being is because part of improving yourself is learning. You know what I'm saying? Learning
mm,
and growing as a person.
right,
And if you are not capable of doing it, now, if you did your best and tried, because even if you try to learn a subject and you never get it, you are still at that point enacting discernment of wisdom. You know what I'm saying? You may not be trying to help other people because you don't know what the answer is, but now you're trying to on the cool learn it yourself. You know what I'm saying? As you're still bumping your head against the wall. That's
right,
the discernment. That's the understanding of the discernment of wisdom. Like any other jewel, there are multiple facets and concepts behind it.
right. Got it. I love how he names it, right?
Mm,
Um, talks about it. Any definite teachings, no definite teachings. I like this part about like are there many particles of dust in the vast universe? But he's, am I thinking of any definite or arbitrary, or am I just using words as figure of speech? They are not real, only illusion. Uh, it's kind of like I think Alan Watts does a really good job when he talks about the Zen part. Like you know, when we tell somebody we see like the mountains and sky or something like that, we say mountains and sky, but otherwise we just see it, right? Like I mean, once we give it words, then it kind of gets lost, right? And then these 32 physical characteristics, we covered that. That we definitely covered that in one of the chapters. But those are just names, words, and they're not what they really are.
the
And
the Buddha disclaimer that says do not take this into a literal sense, i.e., when you go back into the other parts where he's surrounded by gods, demons, dragons, angels, and all that other stuff. It just meant people from different religions. That's what that meant.
when what?
Um, okay, there is it's the Heart Sutra.
Right.
And when you go and look at the Heart Sutra, there the transcripts around revolving around the Heart Sutra, you will note that Shakyamuni Buddha was in multiple places supposedly at once, therefore being multiversal at that point because he was in particular multiple places. And it
Okay.
describes how he was in all of these places far across the land at the same time because they were trying. And most people said that Buddhism was trying to depict him as being able to time travel. And actually, what they were intending to mean was his teachings were starting off in multiple areas where he once was because they were gaining traction. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Big
yeah,
difference. He was not
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
multiversal.
Right, right, right. Definitely a big difference. I love that. Okay, okay. Um,
Yeah. Just a disclaimer for those people who literally are like, I did not see this fiery brimstone come from the sky.
right, right,
You know,
right,
them people.
right. Got it, got it. Let's grab 14. Let's grab
Okay.
14. I think 13 is pretty clear
Self-explanatory.
cut, right? I mean, and we've covered like the whole idea of the definite teaching part. And I would still say like if there's a definite teaching, you can't be sure of what somebody else has learned, anyways. Is that fair to say? Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even if somebody's sharing a lesson with somebody else, and the other
Yeah.
person gets it, they may not be getting it in a definitive way.
Yeah.
Fair
Takes time.
enough.
It soaks in different seeds grow in different grounds, different rates, different speeds.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, you know what? It's funny you say that. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he's like, I meet people, and they don't. And when I go to meet with them, they're not like me, and I try and have a conversation, but I can't find my people. And I'm like, you got to remember kind of like where you were, right? You got to remember like you weren't always where you are today, right? And he's like, fine, I'll talk to other people and do whatever. And I get like a message later in the day, and he goes like, well, I tried it and I talked to somebody and they weren't getting it, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, in the back of my head though, I'm like, maybe you at least planted a seed, right? Like maybe now that person with the information that you gave
Mm,
them is going to go Google some of the stuff that you were talking about. Maybe they weren't
right.
comfortable with because they don't have, the past 4 or 5 years of knowledge that you've got as you've been, filling your head with
Mm,
everything right now. Like what the things that you say today, they weren't always your natural way of speaking,
mm,
right? Okay. All right. 14. What kind of time? Well, let's see what we got here. Oh my goodness. All right.
mm.
This will be a speed date with chapter 14. Let's check it.
No speed date, huh?
Speed date in Buddhism.
Like to
Chapter
have that number
14.
two enlightenment to please go.
I'll need my enlightenment with a side of fries, please. And you got waffle fries? That'd be great.
Would
Um,
you like them seasoned and supersized for 49 cents more?
Please extra sauce. Um, at that time, after listening to the sutra, Subhuti had understood its profound meanings and was moved to tears. He said, what a rare and precious thing it is that you should deliver such a deeply profound teaching. Since the day I attained the eyes of understanding, thanks to the guidance of the Buddha, I've never before heard such teachings so deep and wonderful as these. Most honored one, if someone hears this sutra and has pure and clear confidence in it, they will have profound insight into truth. Having perceived that profound insight, that person will realize the rarest kind of virtue, most honored one. That insight into the truth is essentially not insight into the truth, but what the Buddha calls insight into the truth. Mark that one. Most honored one, having listened to the sutra, I am about to receive and retain it with faith and understanding. This is not difficult for me. But in ages to come, in the last 500 years, if there is a person who hears the sutra, who receives it and retains it with faith and understanding, then that person will be a rare one, a person of most remarkable achievement. Such a person will be able to awaken pure faith because they have ceased to cherish any arbitrary notions of their own selfhood, other selves, living beings, or a universal self. Why? Because if they continue to hold on to arbitrary conceptions as to their own selfhood, they will be holding on to something that is non existence. It is the same with all arbitrary conceptions of other selves, living beings, or a universal self. These are all expressions of non existent things. Buddhas are Buddhas because they have been able to discard all arbitrary conceptions of form and phenomena. They have transcended all perceptions and have penetrated the illusion of all forms. How you fucking speed date that shit? The Buddha replied, "So it is, Subhuti, most wonderfully blessed will those beings who, on hearing this sutra, will not tremble nor be frightened or terrified in any way, and why? The Buddha is taught this sutra is the highest perfection, and what the Buddha teaches is the highest perfection that also the innumerable blessed Buddhas do teach. Therefore, it is called the highest perfection. So, Booty, when I talk about the practice of transcendent patience, I do not hold on to any arbitrary conceptions about the phenomena of patience. I merely refer to it as the practice of transcendent patience. And why is that? Because when thousands of lifetimes ago the Prince of Kalinga severed the flesh from my limbs and my body, I had no perception of a self, a being, a soul, or a universal self. If I had cherished any of these arbitrary notions at the time my limbs were being torn away, I would have fallen into anger and hatred. I also remember, Subhuti, that during my 500 previous lives, I'd used life after life practice patience and to look upon my life humbly as though I were a saint called upon to suffer humility. Even then, my mind was free of arbitrary conceptions of the phenomena of myself, a being, a soul, or a universal self. Therefore, Subhuti, disciples should leave behind all distinctions of phenomena and awaken the thought of should leave behind all distinctions of phenomena and awaken the thought of the attainment of supreme enlightenment. A disciple should do this by not allowing their mind to depend upon ideas evoked by the world of senses, by not allowing their mind to depend upon ideas stirred by sounds, odors, flavors, sensory touch, or any other qualities. The disciple's mind should be kept independent of any thought that might arise within. If the disciple's mind depends on anything in the sensory realm, it will have no solid foundation in any reality. This is why Buddha teaches that the mind of a disciple should not accept the appearance of things as a basis when exercising charity. So, Buddha, as disciples practice compassion and charity for the welfare of all living beings, they should do it without relying on appearances and without attachment. Just as the Buddha declares that form is not form, so he also declares that all living beings are, in fact, not living beings. You know, geez, come on now. Um, Most honored one, that insight into the truth is essentially not insight into the truth, but what the Buddha calls insight to the truth. What do you got there?
Okay. Which part specifically are we looking at? What are we honing
Uh,
in on?
it's a top of the chapter.
Okay.
Um, Most honored one, that insight into the truth is essentially not insight into the truth, but is what the Buddha calls insight into the truth.
Okay. Simplest understanding. Remember, the tools of Buddhism are not meant to show you the truth, but meant to lead you direct to the conclusion. The truth has no form. Best way I can explain it.
Truth has no form? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
Yes. Remember, you see where he says that the truth is essentially not insight into the truth, but it is into what the Buddha and calls insight into what Buddha calls the insight of the truth, which means that if you see what he's seeing, even though you don't agree with what it looks like, this is the point where this basically he marked it the best he could for this particular part of it to get to where he was at. So you knew he followed the same process.
Okay.
Yeah. That's basically what that boils down to. It there's I think that's the best. Yeah, if you're clear, yeah, because with clear and confidence, yeah, it just basically means if you've done the best you've got here, that you're going to be at the same spot he's going to be at, whether you see the same thing or not.
You're on that path of nobility. Is that like like we were talking earlier, like
Yeah,
you're on your path and you're on the way. Is that kind of it, even though you can't
basically,
see it right now?
right.
Even if you can't see it right now.
Uh-huh.
Bless you.
Yeah,
Is that right?
right.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
Bless you. Bless you. Do 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 do.
oh, okay. Um, Okay, we're not even in the interest of this being a speed date. We're not getting into the Prince of Kalinga who severed that whole thing because that goes into Indian Buddhism. So yes, we're just going to go ahead and just kind of I'll give you the links and write my little thing and plurbage on there. But yeah,
I'll tell you what.
yeah,
You know what I think. Here's what I think. Here's what I think. I think we'll probably have to come back to this one because it seems like this one's got a lot in it.
what? Yeah, they're like yeah. This is going to be. We are not going to do this one any justice if we speed date this one. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I
This
think
one's
this is like. I mean, this is a bare minimum 30 to 40 minutes just on this chapter.
yeah, she's
I'm
not a
thinking.
London Bridge for 20 minutes and pass. I mean, sorry, she's just not that kind of girl there. Just like
Fair enough.
take
Fair
your
enough.
time.
But in terms of like I don't know this Prince of Kalinga bit. But if if somebody is attached to this reality, such as my limbs and my body, perception of
Mm,
self, and somebody were to rip that away,
mm,
most people would have no choice but to fall into anger or hatred. Is that kind of what he's saying there? Like, you've taken these things from me, even though they don't really exist, right? Like, I mean, is that just kind of what he's getting at there?
basically, yeah. It's the acknowledgement of things being supposedly taken from you, but also, and the whole context of it actually boils down to the Emperor Ashoka from in Buddhism, who there is this long, huge, major debacle that happened there. And long story short, He's the kind of person that went on rare, kill, 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 set everything on fire, kill everyone, and then converted to Buddhism, and all of a sudden was like, I'm such a peace-loving, happy person. And there's a lot of historical content behind that.
Okay. Okay.